So, what is a raid? Again, just to give you more context on top of the context, obviously, Ollie and I collect arcade machines, and the machines that you play here at the archive started out life in an arcade, typically back in the 80s. And then, as we know, the arcades kind of died out. But then at some point, stupid people like me decided it would be a good idea to collect and own arcade cabinets, and one is never enough. So if you're thinking about getting into the hobby, you'll start with one, you'll end up with 20. It's just, arcade collecting voodoo. It's just how it works out. So today, in the here and now, if you want to buy an arcade machine, you might go on eBay, you might join one of the collector forums. And as collectors, we tend to, share and swap and sell between us, but that's becoming more and more difficult these days. But just going back a few more years, like, how did arcades get from arcades into private collector hands? And I think a large part of that, certainly in the 90s and the early 2000s, the main source for classic arcade cabinets were arcade raids. So, Ollie, do you want to give us a bit more?
Yeah, I thought we would touch on this because the term raid is not necessarily a very nice term, an arcade raid. It's like almost you're breaking and entering and then potentially stealing stuff. So we just wanted to talk about where the terminology came. So obviously you can see a dictionary term there for what raid actually means and how it's, very different to what an arcade raid possibly should be. And the terminology first came on GeoCities. So all of these raid sites, these raid pioneers, they had all of their spaces on GeoCities. There was some MySpace stuff, but mostly it was GeoCities. And that's where essentially the terminology came from. And all of the arcade forums, Clov, all of those places, they all still use the terminology today. I haven't seen it used in any other sort of picking scenario. If you watch the picking programs on TV, they don't go on raids. So it's a very odd term.
There is one rule that you have to abide to until you've been on the raid, until you've loaded up your Luton and you've got back home and you've unloaded everything and you've got it in your garage or in your house or your storage unit, wherever it is, and you've locked the door and you can breathe, is that you do not talk about an arcade raid. So you don't share any pictures online and go, hey, I found this stash of arcade cabinets and here's a picture of them in an innocuous looking room. There will be someone out there, I guarantee you, who will identify where that room is, where it's located, and they might come in, on the side, undercut you, and before you know it, the raid that you've established is off.
And the best example of that, and I've done it myself, is you see someone post something and you just download the photo and you look at the geotagging of that photo and it will tell you exactly where that photo was taken.
Yeah.
What? Oh, it's me. Right, PCBWay, yes. PCBWay.com is the place to go for your PCBs, CNC milling, 3D printing and all of that great stuff. But my favourite part of the website is their shared projects where you can copy and paste other people's retro projects, put them straight in your basket. You just copy and paste and you get what you want, just like that. Check out PCBWay.com. We love them. Thanks for supporting us.
So let's talk about some specific raids which have happened. This is a good example of a raid that's not really a raid in the traditional sense of the word, right, Al?
No, it was about helping a family that needed help. So they had lost their father who ran automatic services. The actual automatic services company was handed down from his father. And unfortunately, he was no longer with us. And the family didn't know what to do. They had a barn that was probably 1,000 square foot of machines and parts, as you can see, and they didn't know what to do. They had reached out to resellers who had obviously gone in and either were not interested or had maybe made lower offers. So we got involved through a family friend that was a pinball collector. And we essentially, me and Tony went up, we catalogued the entire thing.
That's Ollie's butt.
Yeah, that's my bum. we catalogued the entire thing. We had to climb over everything because everything was a crazy mess, to be honest. We graded everything, and then we reached out to people that we know and trust with a view to get the best price for the family. That was the most important thing. And we've done it a few times over the years, and this was just the most recent one. The reason this is here is because some of the games and the boards are now with the Arcade Archive, so you've probably played on those, and I know there's been YouTube videos of some of the conversions that have gone out. And the other thing was because Automatic Services was a pioneer, that they made their own cabinets, and they were very, very good jammer cabinets. We changed it where we reached out to some of the smaller sort of barcades, and we actually had this vision of putting some of the old jammer cabs back into service. It wasn't just about going to a collector. So Arcade Archive have some, Pixel Busters or Pixel Bunker has some. The Replay Events place, the Retro Realm place has them now as well. So that was really, really important to us as like a lasting legacy to this family.
What's interesting about that photo is we were in a room clambering over, as you saw in the previous picture, clambering on top of arcade, and it was like an old kitchen units, and you just like they didn't know what was there, and obviously neither did we, and you'd just be opening a random cupboard and just kind of finding things like that, like 10, 15 PCBs just kind of lying around. One of the most significant memories of this particular raid was what we called the wet room. So this was one of it was kind of split into three main rooms. This was the room sort of furthest back. None of the lights worked, and you soon realised why. It was the rain had got in, and it was slowly but surely kind of dripping in. On the left there is a Space Invaders pinball. As you can see, literally just touching it, and it was just kind of crumbling apart. That's a big stack of 19-inch monitors. Some of which I think have made their way back here.
They were all pulled from, so the jammer cabs, that Ghost and Goblins, there was he operated over 200 of them all around the area, didn't he? And I think there was around 30 left that were still in the barn, and that is the rest of the others. They were smashed up and the monitors were just stacked.
Yeah. It was pitch black, and I kind of ventured in and kind of clambered in and sort of slipped and fell, and I just heard this voice, "Tony, you all right?" I said, "Yeah." And I just got to start standing, and I sort of put my foot in, and there was just this crunch.
Yeah, crunch.
What's that? So I kind of leant down and kind of pulled up, and it was just like a 5 stack of Atari boards they were all on shelving on the wall, and where the water had got in, the shelving literally just came away from the wall, and it all just all collapsed down, and it was pitch black, and I was crunching on Gravatar boards, Food Fight boards, Asteroids boards, you name it, and it was just like just don't want to go any further. So just retraced my steps and just kind of left it until
it was about a foot deep, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was absolutely nuts. So this is when we went back with the rest of the guys. Here's some of the things which we were able to take away. Point blank there, Terminator 2. There's Collector Les loading his haul up.
There is the Crystal Maze.
Yeah. So
2 of them, weren't there?
Yeah, there's a couple of crystal. So the daughter of the guy who had passed away said, "I'd really like to keep that Crystal Maze because I remember playing it when I was a kid, and we were like, okay, great, yeah, no problem." And we went to move it, and we looked up, and there was a little pinhole in the roof, and it was the only place in that room where rain had dropped in, and it had clearly been dropping in on top of the Crystal Maze for probably years. So we grabbed the top, went to move it, and the bottom stayed where it was, and the whole thing just collapsed on the floor. So we were pretty gutted about that.
And it was the one machine that they wanted to keep to remember their father by. So
that was a shame. That's the wet room with some light shone on it. It was damp. I remember 5 minutes in, stepping on something, and my foot went up to about there in water. So I spent the rest of the raid with a soaking wet foot. Yeah, it was pretty bad. There's the Atari boards that I was crunching on. That's a control panel from a Defender. And one of the key things we found in there, in the wet room, was an Atari Star Wars upright, as you can see, with the Defender next to it. So I was kind of trying to get dibs on that. So when we actually went in to try and move it, you can just see what happened. Literally, the base stayed where it was, and the rest of it just kind of fell away. But as with all good raids, we were able to salvage parts from it. So, Ollie, I think you got the color vector monitor from it.
I did, and the yoke, and the actual plastic bezel.
Yeah, it's the Trafford.
And I think it's actually there. It's there. It's right behind the paper.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
There it is. So it can be used as. I think that was the plan, wasn't it, to have it as some sort of homage and art installation to it. So it was apparently that was his favourite machine. The guy was called Mark Shepherd, and that was his favourite machine. And unfortunately, it succumbed to the conditions. But we managed to save the parts. Yeah. So it was a good time. There were probably 4 or 5 Luton vans, and we were able to load things up. Just as we were leaving, everyone was like, look, it's getting dark, we've got to go, it's getting cold, everyone had kind of had enough. I don't know what it was, something just told me to just go back in and have one more look in the wet room. So I went back in with my torch, looked at this corner, thought, there's something, and I moved something out of the way, on my hands and knees underneath, and I pulled out 3 6100 color vector monitors, which if you're an arcade collector, I mean, that's just like the monitor. Pretty much a holy grail, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. And there's us at the end. So that's the first raid we wanted to share with you. But again, just to reiterate the point, it isn't all about, money changing hands and going in and clearing stuff out. This was a genuinely great day, and the family were, very, very grateful.
Yeah, they were great
to us for not only helping them, deal with this huge issue that they didn't really know where to start with, but probably more importantly, they were delighted that the parts and the cabinets were going to get back out there, and they were going to be used and played by the general public. So it was a very satisfying day. Next raid, going to go back a few years to Old Trafford, home of Manchester United, of course, in Manchester. And Ollie's going to pick this up.
Yeah, so we were informed that there was a stash of cabs in a market area at Trafford Park. And we didn't know what they were, but there was a guy that services pinballs, and it just so happened his unit was on the other side of the street. And he was there doing his pinball stuff as his business, and then he would start to see video games coming out, being put on the side and then going back in. And that was one of the buildings. So they were moving it out of the main building and starting to put them in essentially lean-tos. So a couple of people, it's amazing how everyone starts to get sniffs of this. So suddenly I started seeing traffic where people were asking me things like, have you heard anything about anything, without trying to give too much away. And about 2 or 3 of us eventually kind of phoned each other, put all our cards on the table, and obviously we had been made aware of this. This was actually an old collector, a notorious old collector. You can talk to me in private about that notoriety. And he had emigrated to America. He had basically told everyone that he had moved all his games to the US. But he clearly hadn't. He had actually done a deal and was paying rent to these people for around 100. It was around 100 cabinets, and then he just went off the face of the earth and hadn't paid rent for 2 years. So they started talking to solicitors, understanding the legal consequences, and basically said, you're allowed to sell this to recoup costs. And we eventually got into that discussion, finalised all the paperwork, and then went in and bought them for a pretty substantial amount of money, but there was about 15, 20 people that got involved to do it. And as you can see, there's a lot of classic cabinets. There was 2 Space Harrier cockpits, or deluxe Space Harriers, which are now restored and working. There was 2 or 3 Atari Star Wars cockpits. You can see them. Might have even been 4. A European or an Irish Atari food fight, and just lots and lots of Atari cabinets. And this guy, literally, when Atari Island went bankrupt, or Atari went bankrupt and Atari Island closed down, he had to be honest, the genius of just hiring a van, and he drove over to Atari Island in Tipperary, as essentially all of the stuff from the warehouse had been pulled out and there were skips everywhere. And he just went in and just said, can I take this stuff? And they were happy. So he took a lot of cabinets that were in the canteen. That included unreleased prototypes. More importantly, he took a lot of paperwork, which I have some in that plastic container there, and we can talk about that later. But it was also his, years of collecting. And there was just a ton of games. That is the Atari Tempest cocktail number 15. It was 0015. It was earmarked for the UK. So they were never built in Atari Island. That's actually a US built one, but it was specifically for the UK market, and it was serial number 15. Time Traveller. Everyone remember that game? Yeah, fantastic. So this is one of my holy grail finds that I would love. I used to play this at Clarence Pier. And when you're starting to talk with people to agree what you're going to take, everything gets put into buckets essentially, like, grade A games, grade B, grade C, grade D. And the whole premise of it is everything has to be fair. Someone can't just go in and say, I'm taking all the cream, and by the way, here's this. You have to be willing to give. And I really wanted this, and someone else really wanted it as well. So I had to say, and I walked away from it. And he got it. So there's one of the Star Wars cockpits. It had an amazing bottom because it was sitting on a plinth, which meant there was hardly any, there was no drag damage on it at all.
A Star Rider in the background there?
Yeah, I think there was 2 Star Riders, wasn't there? Stun Runner, Mortal Kombat, a really, really rare Atari Island Fast Freddy. That was something Atari licensed, and the actual name for it is Flyboy, it was by a Japanese or a Korean manufacturer. I forget exactly who at the moment, that'll come back to me, but actually the name's called Flyboy if you look at it in MAME, and the Atari version's called Fast Freddy. And then an Escape from the Planet of the Robot Monsters, which obviously, I actually got that. I had amazing memories of playing it on the Atari ST, and that was something I managed to acquire for my collection.
So from Manchester
to France.
We're going to take you to France. Ollie, you'll put me right here if I've not got this quite right. So the context of this is a guy...
Couple, wasn't it?
It was a couple, and they put a couple of 70s arcade cabinets on Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah.
Somebody rang up, expressed an interest, started asking them a few questions about where did this come from, have you got any more? And it turns out this couple had bought a cafe in a town in France, way down, and they bought it sight unseen for
€15,000.
15,000 euros, sight unseen. Bought it, were given the keys, went in, opened the place up, and it turned out the whole thing was completely full of...
It was infested.
It was infested with classic
arcade games.
Arcade cabinets. So the guy obviously got in touch with Ol because Ol knows how to arrange a raid. We got a trusted group of people together. Hired some Luton vans, literally got on the Eurotunnel, and off we went in convoy.
Yeah.
3 or 4 of us. Anyway, after a long, arduous journey, we found the town, made our way to the building, and this is the building involved. Au Bon Coin means a nice place. It was anything but. I have got some footage here that I'll kind of let play. the main thing about it was the condition of the building. And I'll never forget Alex, who's here with us, was on this, and we were parking the van and we walked down, and Alex was coming up the other way. Are you all right, mate? Did you go in and sit? Yeah, I've been in there. And what do you think? He said, I'm not going back in. He said, seriously. So Alex, obviously in the building trade, he said, I've never seen anything like it, and we should not even be walking through the door. It's that dangerous. I didn't quite believe him, but as you'll see from some of this footage, yeah, it was pretty unpleasant. Note the 70s decor, which is kind of how long this place had been shuttered up for. And I don't know if you can see what are they called, Alex? The props?
Acros. Acros.
Ceiling.
Right. So
They were on milk crates.
yes. So these acro props that were meant to hold up the interior ceiling were stacked on top of milk crates, literally. That's how precarious the whole thing was.
So structural arcade cabinets then?
Right, yeah, exactly, yeah.
There was a gunfight holding up one of them.
Yeah, yeah, there really was. So this is kind of one floor up. That was one of the more secure rooms.
And that jet fighter had literally looked like it had almost slipped because the floor was just bowing and it was just slowly going to the centre of the floor.
Yeah. Right, so that was a ceiling, or rather was a floor, and it had already gone through.
You can see a door, there's a door just hanging in the air, there's two doors hanging in the air.
On the left there is a Donkey Kong cabinet, a couple of jukeboxes.
And they were Atari, that was an Atari jukebox, which is highly unusual. So you can just see where the ceiling's been just slowly coming down over the years. Gottlieb Volcano Pinball. Kind of seen better days. But it was there for the taking. I think the guy was the main driver of, we can buy somewhere in France super cheap, do it up, and hey, bingo, we've got a really cheap property. I think his girlfriend or his wife, partner, kind of realised that actually they weren't going to live in this anytime soon. And when we were talking to them, pretty much the council or the village council were basically already complaining to the new owners, saying, what's the plan for this? It's 5 stories high at the back. It's dangerous. What are you going to do? And we did actually have a conversation. We all stood outside and said, should we go back in? And ultimately, we all decided to go back in.
Yeah, probably
and then
should.
started walking very precariously on the floorboards because the floor was rotten and wet and was actually dropping in places. And we just slowly recovered a cabinet that was worth recovering, obviously, one at a time. And then we had a crew that was taking them down the stairs that ran through the centre of the property.
This is up in the roof. If you can probably see, notice there's lots of light up there, which probably shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And there was one, it was kind of at the end of the Italian Job, when the gold's at the end of and they start walking towards it and the whole coach go, it was like that. It's a battle zone cabinet. So that is a Ricochet, kind of like a pong game, very, very early, sort of mid-70s, I would imagine. And it was just so tempting, but the moment you stepped anywhere close to it, you just felt the whole thing, the whole of the floor was just kind of going. And that was above the bit below where, as you saw earlier, where the whole floor had gone. So if you'd have gone down on that, you wouldn't be falling 12 foot, you'd be falling 50 foot. And there you can see the 2 red, what are they called? Acropop?
Acros.
Yeah. On wooden milk crates. So it was, it wasn't great. There's 3 cabs there. On the left-hand side is a Destruction Derby, Super Road Champions there, and a Steeplechase cab, which I took away with me. That's now been restored and is fully working and is in Pixel Bunker Arcade.
John Turner's Arcade.
John Turner's Arcade. A couple of scenic views there up in the loft. You see the light shining through the roof. There's the Ricochet that Yeah, that's not a funny angle. That is the angle of the floor of that ceiling. It was there, and no one had the nerve to make it. It just wasn't worth it.
That's a Tato Blue Shark, a Tato Safari. And then if you look to the left of the Tato Blue Shark, which is the white and blue cabinet, you can just make out an asteroid's shape, and that is a lunar lander.
Yeah, which we tried so hard to get that
But
out.
did get it in the end.
But yeah. Jet rocket, that's my sack truck there, and my sack truck has never been the same since. It's when you get the dodgy shopping cart at the supermarket, the wheel that always wobbles. My sack truck's never been the same. So that's a Sega jet rocket.
1976.
Yeah, electromechanical thing. It's huge, but if you see any gameplay of it online, it's stunning. This would be the perfect place for it, Neil.
Yeah, it
sadly,
would.
but I think it ended up going on eBay, didn't it?
It did. So we had at this time we'd taken everything that we thought was safe to get, and then everyone was talking about how special this Sega jet rocket was, and I think it's got the same pre-updated Sega logo that your gunfight has. And we all knew it was extremely special, and it was in this room in the heart of the building where literally, like I said, the floor had sunk, and that thing weighed a ton. And we kind of stood outside for a while deciding, do we take the opportunity? Do we take the risk to get it? And there was an old hatch on the side of the building that we spent about half an hour busting open, which actually led us a much shorter path to get it. And then we all decided that we would very, very carefully try and tease it across the floor, get it onto its back, and then get it out of the building. And I'm pleased to say we managed to do that. And it went to Jolien, who was the person that kind of organised all of this. So that's us all loading up. There's a super rare Sega head-on. The cabinet that's facing us is a 1976 Sega Motocross. That's the Japanese cabinet. It's a wood grain cabinet. It says motocross on it, but the actual one that you probably would be familiar with is the Fonz. So in America, it's exactly the same cabinet with white size, and it had the Fonz from Happy Days on it. It was called the Fonz, and it was a motorcycle game, and they basically tied it into Happy Days, and it sold tons of units. But that is originally the original release. XD Circus, the orange cabinet was what I got, and it was the only thing I was really going to go and get. That is a 1976, again, I think, Sega Spaceship, and that is the Japanese license of Computer Space.
The key thing against us on this raid was, apart from the fact we were taking our lives into our hands literally, was time. So we had a ferry booked to get back, and we knew we had a multiple hour drive to get back up to the Eurostar, not the ferry, the Eurostar. And so, yeah, we had to get out of there by about 4:30 to have any chance of making it back. And of course, on the drive back, the only discussion was, oh, we left that. Oh, we didn't. Why didn't we take that as way? It's always the way. So, yeah.
The other thing on the way back, it was a rush to get back in time to catch our designated spot. Otherwise, obviously, it would have cost us hundreds of pounds more to rebook. And how many times did the French speed cameras go off on all our vans? Do you remember?
Yeah.
Do you remember we were driving, and every so often we were like, "What's that?" As we were all flying through France.
Thankfully,
but we never ever got a speeding ticket, so that was good.
Yeah. Anyway, that was France. Very memorable. Good fun. If anybody can tell us what happened to Aubon Coin, who knows? It's probably a nice six-bedroom.
And we actually think that's where that French. Hello was filmed. It's not, but honest to God, when we got there was this woman walking along with a baguette that she'd just got from the bakery. It was very hello.
Yeah. All right. This is one you guys may have read about, I'm sure. The now legendary North Wales Duke of Lancaster ship raid.
And there it is. Yeah, so that is the Duke of Lancaster in its British Rail livery. It's one of 3 sister ships. The other 2 have been scrapped as well, and this is the only one that essentially survives, although to be honest, it's in a very, very poor state. It was built by Harland and Wolff, who built the Titanic. It was commissioned and put into service in 1956. And then it was repurposed and upgraded in 1971 to actually have, to be able to take cars, and they put some doors at the back of it. And one of the sections was turned into essentially cars. I think it could take around 50 cars. And then finally, it was decommissioned in 1979. And that's where John Rowley bought it. He bought it from British Rail, called it essentially the fun ship. I believe, from some recent research, that they paid around £200,000 for it. And then they weren't allowed to take it from where they purchased it to moor it at Mostyn. It wasn't allowed to be called the Duke of Lancaster due to something to do with the monarchy, so they had to sail it under a different name, and they called it actually Lanrock Moor, which sounds very Lord of the Rings, but you can see actually that's in Mostyn, that's where it is. So it's there, that's what it was called, for the purpose of sailing it for that final time. And they had to repaint it as well. British Rail wouldn't allow them to sail it with the black and red livery. They hired a captain because they didn't know what to do, and they paid him to sail it, and they had to get insurance as well. And one of the stories is when they actually were halfway, they had some rough seas, and the insurers actually pulled out, and they had no insurance. And because they were encountering the rough seas, John Rowley said, "Do we need to turn around and go back?" And the captain actually said, "Actually, it's more dangerous to do that. We just need to carry on and do it." But essentially, it became the fun ship, and it operated for around 3 years. It was put into service because John Rowley realised that there was no Sunday trading laws for any that was applicable to any ships, and that applied to if you were at sea or actually if you're at port. So they were all market traders. They wanted to do business on Sundays. It was a family fun day out. They had the arcade, they had a cinema, they had a zoo, and it was just a really, really good venture. I was made aware of it from a friend called Colin Davies when he went on to the website 28 Days Later, and he went, "Ollie, look at that. I've just found that on this website." And he went, "That's cool." And I looked at it, I went, "That is cool." And then that started 2 years of me trying to unlock who the owners of this ship was. The first half of those 2 years I spent talking to the council. I phoned the post office, all the shops locally, trying to find out who owned it. And it all came around to a clothing company in Liverpool called Solitaire. I started cold calling them, asking them I'd like to buy the machines on the Duke of Lancaster. I would phone every month and essentially be shut down. Then I would keep on phoning, and then it turned into, yes, possibly, how much are you thinking? I would give a price, but I need to come and see them to confirm. They would give me a very, very high unrealistic price. And then we just carried on doing that for another year. Eventually, I got to talk to another family member who was actually the son of John Rowley, Anton Rowley. And he was much easier to work with. We negotiated a price, which 48 hours before we were supposed to pick everything up actually went up again, but we were in it at that point, so we just had to work around it. And we went and saw them, and then we were informed, that's us going for the first time, that's Andy Welburn of Andy's Arcade, that's Dom Escott, who runs UK VAT website, and then that is Damon Rowley, who's one of the family members. He took us round, we went through the whole ship, we documented all the games, and then we actually went and actually looked at the whole ship and found what secrets it was giving. There is a missile command, so I know Tony promised you there was no missile command. There was a missile command. There was an Atari Avalanche. There was multiple Space Invaders, including Part 2. And here's my first video. There was around 50, I think there was 58 arcade machines, and then there was 100 or so fruit machines. And actually it turned out some of the fruit machines were like really prized in the fruit machine collector circle.
What year was this?
This video was 2011. I got the opportunity, the call to say, go and visit the ship the week that my partner was giving birth to our first child.
That must have gone down well.
So I had to go. I know you're about to drop, but I have to go. So I did. And it all worked out. It all worked out beautifully. That's an Atari subs, which we'll
come back to that.
Yeah, so I'm immediately detecting that that's something different to the ones that you would normally see. There's a Data East Tomahawk 777 on the side. There were a few pinballs that have all been beautifully restored by some of the pinball collectors. I own that Asteroids. There's an Atari basketball that Aid actually owns now. It's a bit dark here. There's a Space Chaser. There was some really obscure Vector Cinematronics games. There was 2 Star Hawks, and then there was a Tail Gunner 2 cockpit that was in absolutely exceptional condition just over there. That's where the change booth was, and then that door was rammed full of cabinets that had actually failed. It was quite clear to us that they had bought these games. Quite a lot of the games had Ruffler and Deef stickers on the back, but they obviously didn't know how to repair them. So when these machines were dying, they were being rammed into here. There's a really, really rare Meadows Gypsy Juggler there. There was a few Meadows games in here which are almost unobtainium. There's a Gunfight and a Boot Hill.
There are a few Sidam cabs, weren't there, from Italy?
Yes, there was a few European cabs, so they'd obviously bought some cabinets from. So there was a bench with some parts, but all of those boards were basically got repatriated with all the cabinets because I think someone had like taken them out and went, oh, I can't fix this, and everything was left. So that's when we went back. So we went back about 8 months later after all of this back and forth. They were having people break into the ship, and all of the port windows were made of brass, obviously ship's brass, and it was essentially being stolen. So some of the brass portholes were missing and water was getting in. We were pretty much at the point here. They were on legs, but there's literally minor clearance. And we knew that we had to get them out. So from the moment this picture was taken, I think we had them, we cleared the whole place within the month. One of the things that they told me in that final week, as well as that price renegotiation, was that the stairs that they got them up inside the ship was too dangerous. Water does get in, had gone down, and there's no way we're going to be able to use it. So he told me in the week that we were supposed to be picking them up, oh, by the way, you need to have a crane. And if you don't get them this week, because at the time they were looking to scrap the ship, the deal's off and they're lost forever because there's more focus on getting the value of scrap for the ship than the games. So I immediately had to try and find somewhere to get a huge crane. My favourite pinball designer is Pat Lawler, Addams Family, Twilight Zone, Earthshaker, all of those really, really cool classic games. And I immediately started using the internet to try and find crane hire companies. This company was something like 8 miles down the road, and he was called Danny Lawler. And I just realised that was meant to be. So I didn't bother phoning anyone else. I phoned him up. And everyone thought that the crane was crazy. No one could believe the crane. he was so interested in getting on the ship. He said, "I'll do the whole thing for £350, just cover my costs." So everyone else was thinking, "My God, you've gone completely bonkers." But he went up and he walked around the ship, and that was the deal that we did. And he brought that trailer, and he said, "What we do is we just strap it up, and we load and unload." And one of the other deals was all the pictures and all the videos I had to email him after, which I subsequently did. There was Alka Space Firebird, which is the same cabinet as the Carnival. There's a Zachariah, I can't remember if that's an Astro Wars or a Galaxia. There were these really cool Starfighter or Space Fighter cabinets. It's the one in the centre. And actually on the artwork, there's a TIE fighter, and there's also Darth Vader's head. And it's a complete bootleg game. It's UK built. And there was a few of those. Oh my God, we're going to talk about Missile Command again.
Look at that.
That is a Missile Storm built by Saddam. That is Missile Command, and I believe there's a very famous lawsuit that happened with this game, wasn't there?
Yeah. The key interesting thing about the Saddam cabinets, especially the Missile Command one, is they designed it in a way where instead of the cabinet sort of sloping up, it actually slopes down, so you find yourself playing the game. It's just easier on your wrists.
Yeah.
So I thought it was
You would have thought Atari would have thought that.
Yeah, quite a neat thing.
So it's called Missile Storm. It's the exact copy of Missile Command, and I believe this was the first game where there was a lawsuit where Atari sued Saddam, and then there was the whole case of them looking at the code, wasn't there? And they pulled the ROMs from the Saddam board, pulled the ROMs from an Atari, and then it went through in litigation in court to prove that Saddam hadn't just made a game called it Missile Storm and it just so happened to be Missile Command. It proved that it had nicked the code. Atari won, and then Saddam had to stop making these. These are really, really rare cabinets. I think there's probably a handful in existence. Some arcade collectors got in contact with us, member UK VAC, and he went, "Oh my God, I remember going to a ship with arcade machines on a day out with my parents." He contacted his parents, and they still had a photo album, and he scanned this in, and that's him and his brother at the fun ship. And then there's the Santa Fe train, and then there's them on the train as well. Amazing.
So cool, isn't it? Brilliant.
I guess the final thing to say as well was when they said you've got to do it this week or the deal's off because we're going to scrap the ship. The ship was worth £1 million in scrap, and they had a deal. So we were going to get the machines off. I think they had probably emptied a few other bits and bobs to sell. We were taking the machines, and then literally it was going to be scrapped, and they were going to get £1 million. When the scrappers came, they obviously realised it had asbestos. There was asbestos on some of the pipes, and there was certainly asbestos in the lower decks and the engine rooms. And the deal was they had to get all the asbestos removed, and then the scrappers would come in and give them £1 million. I subsequently found out that the asbestos removal people had come in and given them a quote of £1 million to remove the asbestos. So that is why the ship still remains today.
All right, thanks, Sol. So from the Wirral, I'm going to take you to Ireland next. I'm a little sketchy on the details of this, but essentially an Irish member of our forum community, again, got in contact with Arnold and said, I am aware of an arcade that's closing down. They're looking to clear out and sell some of their cabinets. Do you want to get a team of guys together to get over there, take a look and see what's what? So that's what we did. Here we are, outside of an innocuous looking building. What we thought was interesting about this place was that it was in Ireland, and so of course the links to Atari Ireland were
Strong.
Were very strong. In talking to the lady responsible for selling all of this stuff, she would tell us that the owner of the arcade would go over to the UK, to London, to the AMOA, a kind of arcade trade show, wait until the end, and then they would literally buy the cabinets that were showcased at this exhibition for cash from the exhibitors, because it saved them boxing them up and kind of shipping them away. So they were literally buying some of this stuff, straight off the exhibition floor, which meant they had some really interesting cabinets.
Yeah.
There was a lot of rare stuff there. So this is when we arrived, and we're just having an initial look around at what's what. You can see some newer titles. Scud Race.
That's pretty much when it closed down, wasn't it? Like Scud Race was probably the newest game.
That red tent I ended up with and restored it.
You can actually hear. Yeah, so what was really, really weird, have you ever been in an arcade and stuff doesn't work and they just leave it on? Have you ever seen that? This was exactly what happened in this scenario. So there was these machines that would be on or partially working, and you just get all of this sort of like nostalgia of noise that you would recognise in places.
Plenty of jammer type cabinets, as you'd expect.
There was over 50, wasn't there? Electrical and Goliath cabinets.
So part of the deal was not only was all there this kind of, super interesting collectible stuff. There's a couple of stun runners there. Atari Championship Sprint on the right-hand side. Berserk, a Space Trek. I guess that's a rare one.
That is a rare one, yeah.
Yeah.
There was Atari TX1.
So possibly one of the biggest and heaviest driving cabinets you could probably come across. 3 monitors. We did take this, but it ended up with Andy from Arcade Club.
Yeah, it's with, so the Goliaths are with Andy at Arcade Club. I think somewhere there'll be a picture so the Goliaths are all at Blackpool now. So if you've gone to Arcade Club in Blackpool, you've played the games. The TX1, I believe, is under some sort of long-term plan to restore. Personally, I don't think it needs a lot of work. It just needs the electrics going through, the monitors being serviced, the board set probably being repaired. But they had 3 TX1s at one point. And this is probably the Atari Island connection where they got some pretty unusual games and probably had them for longer. They gave the other 2 away. There was a guy that lived locally that was obsessed with the game. And he was so obsessed with the game that they said, look, you can have 2 of them. And he has both of them in his garage. He's never successfully got them working, but he won't sell them either. But this was the one that was left. And hopefully this will be at an arcade club working soon.
That's the red tent that I was able to pick up, now fully restored. Fully working, another shot of some cabs there. So this was the upstairs, and these were the one of 20 or 30
upstairs, yeah.
Goliath jammer cabs. And part of the deal was, well, if you're going to take, the interesting cabs, you need to take this stuff as well, which thankfully that's where Andy from Arcade Club came in, because he was looking to open Blackpool and he needed some inventory to obviously build out the arcade. Yeah, so these were the remains of cabinets that had been destroyed and smashed up over the years.
There were many, many remains. They had smashed up hundreds of machines. We were going through their parts. I mean, these are Sprint 2 panels. We found the parts of 2 or 3 Spy Hunter cockpits, about 5 Berserks. We found the remnants of 6 Namco Bombies, and that was the sequel to GB. So that was Namco's second game. They had 5 of them, and we found the marquees and the boards. They had smashed up hundreds of games, and we were lucky to be able to get some of the parts.
Obviously, going to Ireland to pick up our little collectible items and bring them back to the UK, it would have been tricky to get those in our hand luggage. So we had to get an HGV.
2.
2 HGVs.
Yeah, and a forklift.
So here we are loading up our spoils.
I take it this was before Brexit.
So that was a great question, because there was Brexit had happened, and I knew that this whole new customs union thing and border was coming in. We did this 2.5 months before the new year, and then we would have had to have done VAT, customs, loads of paperwork. So we got out just in time, which was one of the beauties of it. Obviously, it's not really viable to if there was something else like that, it just wouldn't be worth the stress.
2 stun runners, which was quite a find.
Both at Arcade Club. 2 Tato Grand Champions. I would imagine these came off the Amoa floor when they spoke about going over. They would go over in vans and buy games from Amoa.
And that's Blackpool. Presumably that's pre-opening.
That was pre-opening, yeah.
Of Blackpool, but those are all of the jammer cabs that we got out of the island location. Now playable in Arcade Club Blackpool, if you're ever there. So we take you from Ireland to Wales, covering everything.
Yeah, this was done around 11 years ago.
Do you want to give some context?
Yeah, so I'd always heard about this fictitious barn in Wales from an old school UK VAT collector that's not really in the hobby, but he would always tell me about this and would tell me that he'd been there, and there were multiple really cool cabinets, centipedes, Star Wars cockpits, but would never tell me where. And even though he didn't have much interest in going back and doing it, just through sheer luck, because a lot of what I'd do is I'd use a phone book, I'd use the internet, and I'd just phone operators. I ended up landing on the actual one without realising. And when I went and visited, I put 2 and 2 together. And this was the place. And this was, 12 years ago. They had multiple Space Invader machines, track and fields. They had 2 Star Wars cockpits. They did have more because I found the back glasses, and also Return of the Jedi cockpits as well, because I found those back glasses as well. They pretty much had everything. And if Ireland had butchered machines, this place was a mass murderer of machines. We went through the top floor, and then at the back of this sort of modern unit, there was an old flint barn, wasn't there? And it was, really, really old. And the further back you got, the earlier stuff you would find. We were finding laser disc players, and when you open them up, they had Dragon's Lair discs in. We found manuals for Tapper, for Spy Hunter. We found board sets. We found stuff for Buggy Boy, if everyone remembers Buggy Boy, which is pretty much one of, if not my favourite game. We found Early's pinball tables, but you had to dig for it. It was chaos. There was just everything was on top of everything. That is Tony. He had to pull stuff out, and then we were going under racking. And what did you find?
I was like 6 Atari Power Bricks. It was like it was kind of as close to archaeology as you could possibly get. So you'd look at something, you go, okay, so there's a load of fruit machine boards, and then you'd kind of clear those out, and then you go in and there's some jammer boards like from the 90s, and then you kind of clear that out, and you go, there's an Atari Power Brick. So they were literally, obviously when they smashed arcade cabinets up in the 80s, they thought, okay, we're going to put all that in the shelving. And then in the 90s, well, we're going to need to smash some more cabinets, so we'll smash that up and put that in front of the 80s stuff. And it just literally piled up and piled up and piled up, and it was absolute chaos. And the more times we went back, the more we'd find that we'd literally stepped over something that you didn't realise.
We cleared it out. We went back probably about 6 times to clear it all out.
Yep.
Of the boards and the parts, and obviously we got the cabinets that first time. But there was around probably 400-500 boards that we got.
Yep.
Parts, and it was just a gift that kept on giving. And when we were there, we would always find more stuff until ultimately that 6th or 7th time that we went, and we'd ultimately cleared it out.
Rinsed it.
That was one of the times I went in my trusty V70, and that is a Bally Fireball pinball.
There's a bunch
That's
of
you, isn't it?
Yeah.
With all the power bricks.
Bunch of Atari stuff that I cleared out one time. Oh, just at the top there. That's the
Steeplechase that you rescued.
the steeplechase from France. You can just make out there.
And then this was part of the older structure that we went through. But this is part of Key Games. So obviously Key Games was part of Atari. This is a knockout, which I can't remember what the US version's called now. We did work that out, didn't we?
Yes. Can't remember.
Can't remember. But that was pretty cool.
You reckon that's the only one left, probably?
Probably the only one left, yeah. And then this is where I pulled my APB out, so it's probably in these pictures somewhere. Might be just out of sight there, but this is generally how I found that APB and how we found some of the cabinets. Just put away, and it's just time. They'd been there for years and years and years.
Yeah. Pair of Atari Road Riots on the right-hand side there.
Yep.
Those link together, so
Yep.
you can play head-to-head. Konami driving game on the left.
Overdrive, pretty
Overdrive.
rare. Yeah.
Very nice condition Space Invaders, if I recall correctly. So there you go.
And that concludes Tony and Ollie's talk on 6 fantastic arcade raids over the years that they've participated in. Thank you so much for coming to share your stories with us here at the Retro Collective. Do go and check out their links, which are all in the video description, especially Tony's arcadeblogger.com website, where you can read about a whole load more raids. And if you're a patron, there's an extra bonus section of this talk about notable finds, which we'll share with you in the coming days. If you enjoyed this and you'd like to come and see a similar event, head to retrocollective.co.uk. Please take a moment to subscribe. And if you really love what we do, head to patreon.com/The Retro Collective to support our efforts. Thanks for watching. See you next time.